The lonely millionaire's twin daughters cried every night for 6 months until the new nanny discovered what no one else saw. The sound began promptly at 9 p.m. First, a low moan, almost a sigh of pain coming from the children's room. Then the other joined in, and in less than a minute, a double cry filled the spacious apartment in the heart of the city. For Liam Stone, that sound was the beginning of another night in hell, a hell that had already lasted exactly 6 months. He stood outside the white door of the room, his hand suspended in the air, without the courage to turn the doorknob. He listened to the sharp, desperate cries of Sophia and Valentina, his daughters. 6 months old, 6 months of a lament that no specialist, no nanny, no prayer could silence. The current nanny, an older woman who swore she had nerves of steel, was inside trying in vain to calm them with a lullaby that was lost in the noise. "Please, girls, please." The woman's voice sounded tired, defeated. Liam closed his eyes. Guilt consumed him. It was a guilt that smelled of hospital antiseptic and the pale face of his wife, Isabella, in her last seconds of life. She passed away the exact moment the twins were born. Since that day, the crying never stopped. It was as if his daughters somehow knew what they had lost, as if they cried for a mother they never held in their arms. He moved away from the door and walked through the large empty living room. The designer furniture, the artwork on the walls, the spectacular city view at night, none of it mattered. His home had become a sonic prison. The girls rejected everything. Bottles were pushed away forcefully. Colorful toys were ignored. The comfort of strangers only seemed to worsen the agony. His phone vibrated in his pocket. It was Ryan, his younger brother. Liam answered, already knowing what was coming. "Leo, I'm calling about the building manager's email again." "I know, Ryan, I received it." Liam's voice was thin, lacking the firmness of the magnate who commanded Stone Holdings. "They're threatening to file a lawsuit. They say the noise is unbearable, that it's violating the condo regulations. 12 nannies in 6 months, Leo. The agency called me today. Mrs. Martinez resigned. She said she'd never seen anything like it." Liam ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weariness weigh on his shoulders. "What do you suggest I do, Ryan?" "I've called the best pediatricians. We've spent a fortune on tests. They have nothing. Physically, they're healthy, but they won't stop crying." There was silence on the other end of the line, filled by the distant sound of the twins' lament. "You can't go on like this. You need to be leading the company, and you've been sleeping at the office for weeks. People are talking. You need someone to fix this, someone definitive." "There's no one definitive," Liam exploded, his voice laden with frustration. "No one can. It's like they miss." He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "They miss her. They miss Isabella." "Forget it, Liam," Ryan said, his voice firm. "They're babies. They need routine, a firm hand. Maybe the problem is you running away every night." The accusation stung, mainly because Liam knew there was a kernel of truth to it. He couldn't bear the crying because the sound reminded him of his failure. The failure to protect Isabella, the failure to comfort his own daughters. He was a failure as a father, and escaping to the silence of his office. In the financial district was his only outlet. "I have to go," Liam said, ending the conversation before it worsened. He didn't go back to the girls' room door. Instead, he grabbed his leather briefcase from the dining table, his car keys, and left the apartment, leaving behind the sound of his personal tragedy. As he entered the private elevator, the silence felt almost violent. The nanny probably wouldn't last until dawn. She'd be the next to give up. As he drove through the city streets, the city pulsed with life, indifferent to his pain. In his office, the silence was absolute. He sat in his executive chair, looked at the sleeping city through the panoramic window, and felt a profound emptiness. Money, power, success. It all seemed like a joke. He would give every cent, every building, every $1 million contract for a single night of peace. A night where he could hold his daughters and feel like he was truly their father. and not just the man who fled from their cries. Kilometers. Away from the silent luxury of Liam's office, in a simple apartment in a diverse neighborhood, another battle was being fought. Helen Smith watched her son, Michael, sleep. At 8 years old, he had an entire world within him, a world that didn't always connect with the outside in the way others expected. His mild autism required patience, routine, and above all, the specialized school in a quiet suburb where he was finally beginning to flourish. A school whose tuition she could no longer afford. Helen moved away from her son's room and went to the small living room, sitting in front of her laptop. The screen showed her bank account balance. The number was so low it made her stomach clench. It had been 3 months since her dismissal from the medical center. Dismissed. The word still tasted bitter. She hadn't been dismissed for incompetence. On the contrary, she had been let go for reporting the negligence of a team that cost a premature baby its life. Her attempt to do the right thing had destroyed her career. No one wanted to hire the nurse who caused problems, the one who didn't stay quiet. Her phone rang. It was Clara, an old colleague from the hospital. "Helen, hi dear. How are you?" "I'm fine, Clara, as much as possible." "And you, running as always. Listen, I know I shouldn't, but I was thinking, any news about work?" Helen sighed, the weight of the world on her shoulders. "None. It seems my name ended up on a blacklist. I've sent my resume to dozens of clinics and hospitals. Most don't even respond. Michael needs the school, Clara. His spot depends on next week's payment." "I'm so sorry, Helen. It's so unfair. You were the best nurse in that neonatology ward, the most dedicated." "Dedication doesn't pay the bills," Helen replied, her voice choked. "But thank you for calling. It means a lot." After hanging up, she returned to her laptop, opening a job search website without much hope. She filtered the search for caregiver and private nurse. Most openings offered low salaries, insufficient to cover her costs. She was about to close the page when an ad caught her attention. The words were direct, almost brutal. "Nanny wanted for twin babies, mandatory requirement. Proven experience with newborns in crisis situations, 6-month-old babies who have been crying for 6 months, full availability." The description was a huge warning sign. Anyone in their right mind would stay far away, but it was the last item that made Helen's heart stop for a second. The salary, $15,000 a month. It was more than she earned at the hospital. It was salvation, the money that would secure Michael's school for a long time. A sense of purpose began to form in her chest. Crying for 6 months since birth wasn't normal. It wasn't colic. It wasn't fussiness. It was trauma, something deep, something her specialization in neonatal music therapy and her years in the NICU with premature babies had taught her to recognize. Those children didn't need an ordinary nanny. They needed a specialist. They needed her. With steady hands, she picked up the phone and dialed the number from the ad. A hurried male voice answered. It was Ryan Stone. Helen introduced herself calmly, listing her qualifications without showing the desperation she felt. There was a pause on the other end. "Are you sure you understand the situation, Ms. Smith? 12 caregivers have already given up. They never stop crying." "I understand perfectly," Helen replied, her voice conveying a confidence she wasn't sure she possessed. "I'd like to meet them." 2 hours later, Helen was at the front desk of one of the city's most luxurious buildings. As she exited the elevator on the penthouse floor, the sound hit her. It was exactly as she had imagined, but still heartbreaking. A double cry, intense, full of a pain that seemed too old for such small bodies. A visibly exhausted woman opened the door. It was nanny number 12, Mrs. Martinez, with her bags packed beside her. She just looked at Helen with pity and whispered, "Good luck, you'll need it." Helen entered. The apartment was magnificent, but she barely noticed. She followed the sound down a hallway and stopped at the door of a nursery. Inside, in 2 separate cribs, were 2 little angels with golden hair and fair skin, their tiny faces red and wet with tears. The crying was so strong, so synchronized, that it sounded like a single voice of suffering. In that instant, Helen didn't see an impossible challenge. She saw two lost souls calling for something that had been taken from them, and she felt with all the strength of her being that she was the only person in the world who could understand that call. Helen's first night was dedicated to observation. She didn't try the techniques the other 12 nannies had probably used. She didn't force bottles, didn't shake rattles, didn't insist on lullabies. Instead, she sat in a rocking chair, positioned exactly between the two cribs, and simply listened. She let the girls' cries envelop her, analyzing every tone, every pause, every explosion of despair. The sound was painful, but for Helen, it was information, and she needed to understand the language of that pain. It was on the second night, when the clock on the wall struck 2:30 a.m., that the truth began to reveal itself. Helen was exhausted, but her nurse's mind was alert. She noticed something extraordinary. The crying wasn't chaotic. There was a structure to it. Sophia would begin, a high-pitched wail, and almost as a response, Valentina would join in with a deeper cry, filling the sound space. It wasn't a competition of screams, it was a duet of grief. They were crying in musical synchronicity, a rhythmic and desperate call for someone who wasn't there to answer. "My God," Helen whispered to the empty room. "Are you calling for someone?" Driven by this new certainty, she knew she needed to find a clue about Isabella. The room was impeccably decorated, but it seemed cold, impersonal. Helen began to look for something that had belonged to their mother. At the back of the spacious closet, behind piles of unused sheets and blankets, she found what she was looking for, a dark wooden box, clearly a personal item kept hidden. With a pounding heart, she took the box to the armchair and opened it. Inside were a pair of woolen booties, an ultrasound photo, and, underneath everything, a leather-bound diary. On the first page, Isabella's elegant handwriting read, "To my daughters Sophia and Valentina, so that one day you will know how much you are loved." From the first instant, Helen began to read, and tears came without her realizing it. There were pages and pages of love, dreams and expectations. And then she found the missing piece, an entry from almost 9 months ago. 9 p.m. is our time. I started singing Nina Nana to my girls. It's an Italian lullaby my grandmother used to sing to me. I sing it every night without fail. I feel them hear me. I feel their movements calm within me. It's our secret. I stay here in their room's armchair singing until 3 a.m., which is when sleep finally takes me. Helen read the same description dozens of times on different pages. The ritual was the same every night. The truth hit her with immense force. The twins weren't crying from colic or hunger, they were crying from longing, a longing for the only world they had known for months. They missed their mother's voice, her warmth, the vibration of her body, the sound of her heart. The crying wasn't a symptom of a problem, it was the recreation of the routine that had been brutally taken from them. They were calling for the mother who had never responded since their birth. Knowing exactly what to do, Helen took out her phone, found a silent corner of the apartment, and with the softest voice she could manage, recorded herself singing Nina Nana. Her voice wasn't Isabella's, but it was the voice of a mother full of affection and understanding. Then, she downloaded an audio recording of slow, rhythmic heartbeats. With a simple app, she combined the two sounds. She returned to the room, her heart pounding with anticipation. The girl's lament continued to cut through the silence of the city night. Helen took a deep breath and pressed play. The gentle melody of Nina Nana began to play, accompanied by the low, constant sound of a beating heart. The effect was immediate and powerful. Sophia's crying faltered, transforming into a confused sob. Valentina suddenly stopped crying, her small head turning in the direction of the phone. In less than 10 seconds, an absolute and profound silence filled the room. It was a calm that apartment had never experienced. The twins' tense little bodies relaxed on their mattresses. Their breaths became tranquil, and their eyes, still shining with recent tears, slowly closed. For the first time in 6 long months, Sophia and Valentina slept in peace. Helen watched them, her face wet with her own tears. The mystery was solved. They just wanted their mother back, and that night, in a way, they had her. Liam woke up the next morning on his office sofa, his body and soul weary. The sun already illuminated the city, but for him, it was just the beginning of another day of torment. He took a quick shower in the private bathroom, put on a wrinkled shirt, and prepared for his return to his apartment, a place he no longer considered a home. The drive was automatic, his stomach churning with anxiety. He already anticipated the sound that would greet him, the sharp, incessant crying that was the soundtrack of his life. As he exited the elevator on his floor, he stopped, waited, and nothing. The silence was so complete, so absolute, that it felt wrong. For an instant, he thought something terrible had happened. His heart pounded differently, not from exhaustion, but from a sudden, unknown fear. He opened the apartment door slowly. The quiet continued. It was a peace he didn't know, a tranquility that made him tense. He tiptoed down the corridor like an intruder in his own home towards the twins' room, the place of all his suffering. The door was ajar. From inside came a low, gentle sound, a hummed melody. He peeked through the crack. The new nanny, Helen, had her back to him, organizing bottles on a counter and softly humming the same lullaby that was playing from her phone, placed nearby. And in the cribs, side by side, Sophia and Valentina slept. It wasn't a restless sleep, interrupted by sobs. It was a deep, serene sleep. Their little faces, which Liam only knew contorted by crying, were relaxed, angelic, their small mouths slightly open, their breathing calm and regular. It was such an unprecedented, impossible sight that Liam felt his legs weaken. He leaned against the doorframe, simply unable to process the scene. At that moment, Helen turned and walked to Sophia's crib, which had stirred a little. With a delicacy that took his breath away, she adjusted the baby, holding her for an instant before laying her down again. The morning light streaming through the window illuminated her profile, the way her hand held the child's head. And for a devastating second, Liam didn't see Helen. He saw Isabella. He saw the wife who dreamed of that room, who dreamed of holding their daughters like that. The image lasted only an instant, but it was enough for a sharp pain to pierce him. "Mr. Stone!" Helen's voice brought him back to reality. She looked at him with a calm expression without surprise. Liam tried to speak, but his voice came out hoarse, a whisper. "What? How are they doing?" Helen said, approaching him. "They slept all night." "But how? What did you do? What medicine did you give them?" Suspicion was his only defense against the wave of emotions that threatened him. Helen wasn't offended. Her gaze was understanding. No medicine. They didn't need medicine. They missed the routine they had with their mother. They missed the music she sang, the sound of her heart. I just gave them a remembrance of what they lost. The explanation was so simple and, at the same time, so profound that Liam felt like a complete idiot. A stranger, in less than 48 hours, had deciphered his daughter's souls, and he, the father in 6 months, had only managed to flee. The truth hit him hard. He had never truly been a father. He was just a man haunted by grief, trying to survive the noise, counting the hours to escape. Helen hadn't just calmed 2 children. She had exposed the extent of his failure. A new feeling, even more frightening than guilt, began to take shape within him. Fear. This peace was fragile. This woman was solely responsible for it. What if she left? If, like the other 12, she decided the job was too much? The idea of returning to the sonic hell after experiencing that calm was unbearable. He wouldn't survive a double loss again. No, not again. The hope Helen brought was dangerous because it made him vulnerable once. More. He remained standing at the door, a powerful millionaire who felt like the weakest and most helpless man in the world, looking at the woman who had saved his daughters and who, unknowingly, had placed him before his greatest enemy, himself. The silence in the hallway was heavy. Liam remained still, a paralyzed spectator before the peace Helen had created. It was she who broke the moment, with a soft but firm voice that forced him out of his immobility. "Mr. Stone, their tranquility is still very fragile. The crying has stopped, but the trauma is still here." During the day, Liam observed what she meant. Although the twins no longer cried with the same intensity as before, they were extremely easily startled. A loud noise, a change in light, the approach of an unfamiliar face, everything put them on high alert. Sophia suffered from nervous reflux that made her writhe in pain after feedings. And Valentina, always the quieter one, seemed too small and fragile for her 6 months. Her weight visibly below ideal. And there was something else, something Helen noticed with her trained eye. They panicked near him. "It's not personal," Helen explained that afternoon as she prepared a bottle. "They associate a male presence, a deeper voice, with a break in the security they feel. We need to reverse this, but first, I need to be sure there's nothing more. I'd like to take them for a consultation at the main hospital." The name of the hospital hit Liam. It was there that Isabella had died. Going back there felt like a punishment, but he simply agreed, unable to deny a request that for the first time seemed logical and well-founded. The hospital visit was a silent torment for him. While Helen spoke with a pediatrician friend of hers, Liam waited outside, the white walls and the smell of disinfectant bringing back the worst hours of his life. It was Helen who, upon leaving the consultation, had a look of profound sadness on her face. She had managed to access the birth records. "Liam," she called him by his first name, the formality forgotten for an instant. "I need to tell you something. Something happened that explains everything." According to the reports, the girls were born exactly at the moment Isabella's heart stopped beating. The information was brutal. Liam felt the air leave his lungs. "What do you mean?" he asked, though he already knew. "I mean the last thing they heard from inside their mother wasn't a song. It was silence. They felt her. Heart stop. Their trauma isn't just separation. Technically, they experienced grief from the first second of their lives." The revelation was devastating. That night, back in the apartment, the peace seemed even more precious and delicate. Helen looked at Liam with renewed determination. "Now you need to learn to be their safe haven. You will learn to be the security they lost. They don't want me near them, Helen. I only scare them because you approach like a stranger, full of fear and hesitation. You need to approach as their father. I'll show you." She called it masculine nurturing. It wasn't about imitating a mother, but about using his characteristics to create comfort. She taught him to hold the girls in a specific way, wrapping their bodies firmly so they would feel contained, as in the womb. She taught him to sway his body in a slow, constant rhythm, similar to walking. And then came the biggest challenge. You need to sing to them. Your voice is deep, and that scares them. But if you sing the same song softly, they will begin to associate your voice with the security the music brings. Liam felt ridiculous, a business magnate about to sing a lullaby, but his desperation was greater than his pride. Helen placed little Sophia in his arms. The girl immediately stiffened, her face contracting, ready to cry. "Now," Helen whispered. "Sing softly," he began, his voice trembling and out of tune. "Nina, Nana, Nina, oh-ho," Sophia began to whimper. "Keep going," Helen insisted. "Softer. Let her feel the vibration in your chest." Liam closed his eyes and tried again, focusing only on the sensation of the small body in his arms. He sang softer, almost a murmur, and then the miracle happened. Sophia's crying stopped. She became quiet, and her large blue eyes, Isabella's eyes, fixed on his. She was truly seeing him. Later, it was Valentina's turn. As Liam gave her a bottle, he began to sing the melody. The girl, who never reacted to anything, stopped, sucking for an instant. Her lips curved into a hint of a smile, a small, fragile but unmistakable smile. It was the most beautiful thing Liam had ever seen. He looked up at Helen, who watched the scene with a discreet smile. In her eyes, Liam saw not just gratitude, but himself reflected. A man who, with that woman's help, was finally and very painfully learning to be a father. The following weeks transformed the apartment. The routine, once marked by despair, was now dictated by a choreography of care and healing. Liam no longer fled to the office. He left work early, eager to get home. The nights, though still tiring, were filled with a shared purpose. Helen's presence became the axis around which the family's new life revolved. The connection between her and Liam grew naturally in the small daily gestures. It was in the way he handed her a warmed bottle without her asking, or the way she made him coffee in the early hours when exhaustion threatened to win. They became a team. While Helen bathed Sophia, Liam changed Valentina's diaper. Both hummed Nina Nana, which had become the anthem of the house. The twins, in turn, seemed to sense this union. They slept better, ate with more appetite, and most impressively, only truly calmed down when they felt the presence of both of them in the room. Helen's calm and Liam's newfound security created an essential balance for them. One summer night, a strong storm broke over the city. The rain beat forcefully against the panoramic windows of the living room, and thunder made the girls startle in their cribs. Helen and Liam spent hours awake, calming them, their shoulders occasionally touching in the cramped space of the nursery. For the first time, they truly felt like a family, united against the noise of the world outside. When the storm finally calmed and the girls were sleeping soundly again, the two sat in the quiet kitchen. "They look like her," Liam said suddenly, his voice low. "Like Isabella. I have a photo of her on my desk at the office. Their eyes are identical." Helen listened attentively, offering the rare gift of understanding silence. "She would have been a wonderful mother," he continued, staring at a fixed point on the wall. "She planned every detail of that room, chose every toy. She said she couldn't wait to teach them to laugh, and I didn't even know how to make them stop crying. You're learning, Liam. You're becoming the father they need." The look he gave her was filled with such profound gratitude that it made Helen's heart ache. In that moment, she wasn't just the nanny, and he wasn't just the boss. They were two people finding a path through pain. But while this delicate web of affection was being woven in the apartment, in the offices of Stone Holdings, other plans were being made. Ryan Stone looked at the financial reports spread across his desk and felt a chill down his spine. The economic crisis was severely affecting business, and the family company urgently needed a capital injection. The solution had a name and a surname: Olivia Davis, heiress to the giant Davis Construction. A merger sealed by Patricia's marriage to Liam would save everyone. For Ryan, his brother's new nanny was a problem, a dangerous distraction. Liam was becoming attached to her, and this jeopardized the future of everything they had built. He needed to act. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he kept for emergencies. "Hello, I need a service," Ryan said, his voice cold and calculating. "The name is Helen Smith, former nurse at the medical center. I want you to investigate her life." "What exactly are you looking for, sir?" asked the professional voice on the other end of the line. "The reason she was fired. I need something to disqualify her, something to get her out of my brother's house permanently. Find any dirt, any mistake, anything I can use. I don't care what it is, as long as it works, and I want it as soon as possible." Upon hanging up the phone, Ryan looked out his office window. He felt no guilt. In his mind, he was only protecting his family, his legacy. He couldn't allow a simple nanny to destroy an empire because of an improbable romance born of grief. In Liam's apartment, the rain had completely stopped, and a sense of peace filled the air, a peace that, unbeknownst to anyone, was about to be destroyed. It took only a few days for the private investigator hired by Ryan to deliver what he wanted. It wasn't the complete truth, but it was enough. With a folder of documents in hand, Ryan scheduled an urgent meeting with Liam at his office at Stone Holdings. "Leo, good you came," Ryan said, closing the meeting room door. His expression was serious, calculated to appear concerned. "I know you won't like what I did, but I had to do it to protect you and to protect the girls." Liam felt a chill. "Protect from what? What are you talking about, Ryan?" "Her, Helen." Ryan pushed the folder across the mahogany table. "I had her past investigated." Liam's face hardened. "You had no right to do that. Helen saved my daughters." "Did she save them or did she see an opportunity?" Ryan opened the folder, revealing copies of reports and a termination letter. He pointed to a specific line. "Read it yourself." Helen Smith was dismissed from the medical center for gross negligence with newborns, resulting in the death of a premature baby. The words seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Liam looked at the paper, then at his brother's face and back at the paper. Negligence, baby's death. The words connected in his mind with his worst fears. He was a man still broken by grief, terrified by his daughter's fragility. The trust he had begun to build in Helen crumbled in an instant, replaced by a cold panic. What if it was all a scam? What if she was a danger that he, blinded by gratitude, had placed in the heart of his home? Rage came next, a blind, powerful fury born of fear. He picked up the phone and called. "Helen." His voice was hard as steel. "Helen, I need you at my office. Now." Less than an hour later, Helen entered the room, her face open and a little concerned by the tone of the call. "Liam, did something happen to the girls?" He didn't stand up. He just stared at her from across the table, his eyes burning with a fury she had never seen. "What happened is I found out who you really are," he said, his voice low and full of venom. "What? What are you talking about?" The confusion on her face was genuine. But he didn't see it. He only saw betrayal. "I'm talking about your dismissal from the medical center. I'm talking about the baby who died under your care." The shock left Helen speechless for a second. "Liam, that's not how it happened. I can explain. I reported—" "Explain what?" he shouted, standing up with a sudden movement, his hands flat on the table, his pain, his fear, and his months of guilt channeled into that moment, into that accusation. "You lied about your competence. You used my traumatized daughters to take advantage of me, to gain my trust. No, I would never do that. You need to listen to me. I don't want to hear your voice anymore." His fury was total. "Get out of my house now. Pack your things and disappear. I never want to see you near my daughters again." The cruelty of the words hit her hard. Helen tried to say something else, but the expression on his face was unyielding. Ryan, who watched everything from a corner, intervened. With a false calm, calling security. Helen was brutally expelled. 2 men escorted her to the apartment, watching her as she, trembling and with tears in her eyes, gathered her few belongings. She didn't have a chance to say goodbye to Sophia and Valentina, to give one last kiss on their foreheads. She was escorted out of the building like a criminal. That same night, hell returned to Liam's apartment. Promptly at 9 p.m., the crying began. But it wasn't the sad lament from before. It was a scream of panic, of abandonment. The twins refused to eat, vomited from crying so much, and their small bodies burned with fever. Liam tried everything. He played the Nina Nana recording, but the sound of Helen's voice was now torture. Without her presence, the music had no effect. He spent the entire night awake, going from one crib to the other, completely helpless. The silence he had learned to love so much had turned into a noise of agony, even deeper than before. Looking at his daughters' suffering faces, Liam felt a terrible chill run down his spine. The anger had passed, and in its place was a horrible, absolute certainty. He had made the most terrible mistake of his life. He had not protected his daughters. He had destroyed the only person in the world capable of saving them. For Helen, the return to her small apartment in the diverse neighborhood was like waking from a dream and falling into a nightmare. Everything seemed smaller, grayer. The hope that had sustained her in recent weeks disappeared, leaving a painful void. She had not only lost a job, she had lost the chance to secure Michael's education. She had lost the connection with two children she already loved as if they were her own, and she had lost the beginning of a feeling for Liam that she barely dared to name. Her suffering did not go unnoticed. Michael, with his heightened sensitivity, absorbed his mother's anguish. The secure routine Helen worked so hard to maintain was broken by her own sadness. In a few days, the boy regressed. He began to have severe anxiety attacks, refusing to go to school or leave the house. One afternoon, the crisis was so intense that Helen, desperate, took him to the emergency room of the medical center. The diagnosis was quick: acute stress. He would need to be hospitalized for observation and to stabilize his emotional state. While Helen watched over her son's restless sleep in a public hospital bed, feeling like the worst mother in the world, Liam lived his own private hell. He hadn't slept for 3 days. The luxury apartment had become a torture chamber. The twins' crying was incessant. 18 hours a day, a sharp sound that pierced his eardrums and his soul. They barely ate, visibly losing weight, and the fever came and went. The pediatrician on his last visit was clear. "Mr. Stone, they are becoming dehydrated. The stress is affecting their immune system. If we can't reverse this, they will need to be hospitalized." Hospitalized. The word terrified him. It was amidst this chaos that he received a call from his secretary, reminding him of a lunch with Olivia Davis, arranged by Ryan. His first reaction was to cancel, but a part of him, exhausted from fighting, just gave in. He met Olivia at a discreet restaurant. He looked like a defeated man, red eyes, unshaven, his expensive suit wrinkled. Olivia, an observant and kind-hearted woman, felt a pang in her chest. The guilt of Ryan's plan weighed on her conscience. "Liam, you don't look well," she said delicately. "It's a complicated time," he replied, his voice hoarse. Olivia took a deep breath. "Listen, I know it's none of my business, but I need to tell you something about your former nanny, Helen. What Ryan showed you wasn't the whole story. He omitted details to favor me so the merger would happen." Liam looked up. For the first time in days, something other than exhaustion appeared in his eyes. A spark of attention. "What do you mean?" he asked. "I don't know the details," Olivia confessed, "but he was obsessed with this merger and saw the nanny as an obstacle. He told me he hired someone to find anything against her. Please verify the story yourself." "I'm so sorry." Olivia's confession was the trigger. As soon as he left the restaurant, Liam activated the best investigators money could buy with a single order. "I want the truth about Helen Smith, the complete truth. Yesterday." The answer came in less than 24 hours and was devastating. The detailed report painted a completely different picture. Helen had not been negligent. She was a hero. She had reported 2 doctors for an error that led to the death of a newborn, and the hospital, to cover up the scandal, fired her and tarnished her name. But the second revelation was what broke Liam from within. The investigators discovered a fact she kept secret. 3 years ago, Helen had also lost a daughter, a baby, who was stillborn in the same hospital where Isabella died. Liam sat in his silent office, the report in his trembling hands. The magnitude of his error was overwhelming. He had not only accused and humiliated an innocent woman, but he had brutalized someone who understood his pain in a way no one else in the world could. Someone who carried an identical wound in her soul. The woman he had expelled was not a schemer. She was the mirror of his own suffering. And he, in his blind fury, had shattered that mirror into 1,000 pieces. The report in Liam's hands seemed to weigh a ton. Every word was a confirmation of his monstrous cruelty. The truth about Helen, about her bravery and her secret loss, crushed him. The first action he took was not driven by business logic, but by overwhelming guilt. His investigators informed him that Michael, Helen's son, was hospitalized at the medical center. In a series of quick and objective calls, Liam mobilized his resources. Anonymously, he arranged for Michael's immediate transfer to a top-tier private hospital, ensuring the boy had access to the best treatment money could buy, covering all costs, present and future. He knew it was an insufficient gesture. He knew you couldn't fix a soul with money. But he needed to do something, anything, to begin to undo the harm he had caused. Then he got into his car. There was no clear destination in his mind, only a name, Helen. He drove to the public hospital, a place he, in his privileged life, never imagined frequenting. During the journey, all his arrogance, all his magnate's demeanor dissolved. He was just a man stripped of his pride, drowning in regret. The atmosphere of the public hospital was chaotic, crowded corridors, people with tired and worried expressions, the smell of disinfectant in the air. It was a world of real pain, and he felt like an intruder. He asked for Helen in the pediatric ward, and a nurse pointed to the end of a corridor. There she was, sitting on a plastic chair, small and huddled, looking at a wall as if seeing nothing. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken from exhaustion and sadness. Liam's heart broke. He approached slowly. "Helen!" She looked up. Seeing him, her face transformed. Sadness gave way to acute pain, to deep distrust. She stood up and tried to pass him to leave, to escape the source of her suffering. "Please!" His voice came out broken, desperate. "Just listen to me." And then Liam did what no one could ever imagine. There, in the middle of the busy corridor, under the curious glances of doctors, nurses, and other families, the powerful Liam Stone fell to his knees in front of her. The tears he had held back for days finally came, rolling down his face unashamedly. He looked up at her, a completely broken man. "Helen, I destroyed the life of the woman who saved my daughters," he began, his voice choked with sobs. "You lost everything because of me, because of my cowardice, because of my fear. I was weak and took all my pain out on you, the only person who tried to help me." People around stopped to observe the scene, but Liam didn't see them. His eyes were fixed on Helen. "My investigators told me everything. They told me about the hospital, about how you fought for that child, and they told me about your daughter. Helen, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And knowing I made you relive that pain is something I'll never forgive myself for." He took a deep breath, the words coming out in a torrent of pure agony. "My daughters are dying without you. Sophia and Valentina aren't eating, aren't sleeping. They just cry. They need you, and I'm dying without you. I pushed you away when I needed you most, and I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I'm begging you, please forgive me. I love you, Helen. I love you, and I desperately need you to come home." Helen looked at him, shock and pain battling on her face. Tears also streamed down her cheeks. She saw the truth in his eyes. She saw the public humiliation, the complete absence of pride. She saw a man transformed by guilt. Her heart was in pieces, but she also remembered the little faces of Sophia and Valentina. With a trembling voice, she finally replied, "I wouldn't come back for you, Liam, not after the way you treated me." He closed his eyes, prepared for rejection. "But I'll come back for them. They're not to blame for your mistakes, and maybe—" She hesitated, her voice almost a whisper. "Maybe one day I can come back for us." That night, an almost sacred peace descended upon the apartment. As soon as Helen entered the room, the twins' crying turned into sobs of relief. They clung to her as if their small lives depended on it, and for the first time in a long time, they slept for 8 hours straight. Later, Liam found her standing, watching over their sleep. He approached from behind, his heart filled with an emotion he could barely contain. "You brought us back to life," he whispered. and in the silence of the night, healing was finally allowed to begin. 8 months later, the morning. Sun illuminated the stained glass windows of a beautiful church in an upscale neighborhood. The ceremony was small, intimate, only for those closest. There was no glitter of a social event, just the soft light of rediscovered happiness. Liam, standing at the altar, was no longer the haunted man who hid in his work. His eyes, once full of pain, now shone with serene devotion as he watched Helen walk towards him. But the true miracle came right behind her. Sophia and Valentina, now 1 year and 2 months old, were the flower girls. Wearing white dresses, they walked with trembling, determined steps down the church aisle, each holding a small basket of flowers. There was no crying. On their faces, only curious smiles for the guests. Seeing them there, healthy, happy, and at peace, was the silent testimony of all the love that had rebuilt that family. Liam's life had transformed in a way he never imagined possible. The ruthless executive who lived for work gave way to a father. He now left the office promptly at 5 p.m. Midnight feedings were shared, diapers were changed with skilled practice, and Nina Nana was sung every night, no longer with a trembling voice of fear, but with the deep, loving tone his daughters had learned to love. The apartment in the city, a place of painful memories, was sold. They moved to a spacious house in a suburban community, with a huge backyard and green grass where the children could run. It was a place of light, of fresh air, a sanctuary for the future, not a mausoleum for the past. Little by little, they became a real family in the simplest details. Michael, who flourished with stability and affection, found in Liam a paternal figure he never had. One day, as Liam helped him assemble a complicated puzzle, the boy looked at him and said, with a simplicity that disarmed the man, "Daddy Leo, can you pass me that blue piece?" Liam felt a knot form in his throat and just handed him the piece with a smile that filled his entire face. Michael, in turn, became the best, most protective older brother the twins could wish for, always making sure they didn't get hurt in their new adventures in the garden. And the girls found their mother one late afternoon as Helen played with them on the living room rug. Sophia pointed to her, her face illuminated by a smile, and said her first word, clear and perfect, "Mommy." Valentina, hearing her sister, repeated the sound with the same joy. "Mommy Helen." Helen hugged them tightly, tears of happiness streaming freely. In that moment, all the wounds of the past seemed to finally heal. That night, the scene in the children's room was the image of peace. Sophia's and Valentina's beds were on one side, and Michael's on the other. The twins were already asleep, their faces serene. Michael was drawing in his notebook peacefully, while Helen, sitting in an armchair between the beds, hummed Nina Nana, which had brought them all together. Liam entered the room silently and stopped at the door, just observing his family, his life, his miracle. He approached Helen and hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder and inhaling the scent of her hair. Together, they looked at the 3 children who were the center of their universe. "Isabella sent you to us," Liam whispered, his voice filled with deep emotion. "She sent you to save our daughters and to save me too." He held her a little tighter, his heart overflowing with a serene and mature love. "Now I know that love doesn't die, it multiplies. We are 5 people, but we live with the love of 6 hearts." And in the quiet silence of that room, under the gentle melody of an old lullaby, the family born of pain found its complete happiness, proving that even after the darkest of nights, the light of a new dawn is always possible. For every woman who has felt the weight of an irreparable loss, and who, trying to rise again, had her heart wounded again by injustice and distrust. For every man who, from the height of his success, looked around and found only emptiness, a solitude so profound that it made him question the value of each of his achievements. For you who, to protect yourself from the world, built walls around your heart, be they of self-sufficiency forged in pain, or of wealth used as an emotional shield. The story of Helen and Liam shows us one of life's most powerful and transformative truths. The cure for our greatest pain is often not where we look for it, but in the place we fear most. It can be hidden in the mystery behind the crying of two children who only missed their mother's heart. It teaches us that moving forward is not forgetting the wound, but deciding that the scar will no longer govern our future. It is having the courage of a man who kneels in a hospital corridor, stripping himself of all his pride to beg for forgiveness. And it is having the strength of a woman who, even with a broken soul, chooses to forgive, not for the man who hurt her, but for the innocent lives that depended on her compassion. And it proves to us, above all, that we are not defined by our titles of CEO or nanny, but by the nobility of our actions. A man can indeed abandon the security of his empire to learn to sing a lullaby with a trembling voice. And a woman can indeed use her own tragedy to decipher the pain of others, finding in this her greatest strength and her true calling. May this story be a reminder that a good heart, even if broken by loneliness or loss, never loses its infinite capacity to love, and that true love is not the one that starts perfect, but the one that survives the storm. It is the love that is built in the early hours in a whispered melody, and that is proven not with promises, but with the courage to say, "I was wrong," and the generosity to respond, "I come back for them, and maybe for us." Do not close the doors to happiness for fear of past pain. Sometimes, life presents us with our greatest blessing in the most challenging way. In the cry that no one can calm, in the job opening that seems impossible. If we have the courage to answer that call, we can find not only the peace we so long for, but the family our heart never knew it needed to feel complete.